Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today we're looking at ways the cinematographer and visual effects supervisor work together. Joining us is cinematographer Greig Fraser and visual effects supervisor Paul Lambert. They've worked together on both DUNE films, and we're interested in learning the way they collaborated on these films as well as others. Guys, thank you for doing this.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you. It's always fun to talk about this.
Yeah. Well,
Indeed.
let's start in prep, since that is the beginning. How did you guys start in prep? What were your first communications together in prep?
You know, if I can start, I mean, I knew Paul sort of only through really reputation, and the films that he'd done with DUNE and with Linus, and generally amongst the DP community, you have a list of good ones. You know what I mean? Like, you go around. That's one of the discussions you have. Obviously, we talk about directors and crew, but VFX soups are one of those ones that you can make or break. Really, can make or break your work. You can spend all this time working towards a certain goal and have the wrong VFX soup working on your project, and you go to the premiere and you end up with something that you maybe didn't expect. I've been super fortunate in my career to have worked with some fantastic VFX soups, but Paul's reputation sort of preceded him, so I kind of allowed Paul to own the room a bit when he spoke. So that was the way I started the project.
Thank you, Greig. June 1 was the first time that I was working with Greig, and I knew that Denis was absolutely raving about him based on the previous projects, and our first contacts were basically in the methodology meetings as to how we were going to do things. And from my perspective, I can't have a successful visual effects shot if I don't have the correct lighting or the performance from it, whether it be the actor or from the stunty. And I think Greig was a little bit taken aback when, during some of the meetings, I would stress things about the lighting, and he said, "Hang on a sec, that's my domain." But it's so important for visual effects, to know what the intent is, and to make sure that you're able to capture that working with these amazing people, some of whom are the best in the world. So it's imperative that you get what you need to be successful in post, and that is very much all about the collaboration. And we came up with some great techniques on June 1, which I still carry. And even projects outside June, we still working with Greig. We still work to a pretty simple methodology, and keeping it simple is the goal to this. On June 1, we came up with the idea of proxy shooting, basically not just arbitrarily put in a blue screen at a certain height. I remember at the very beginning, I was constantly being asked by the art director of the time, well, how high would you like the set extension to be? Basically, what are we building, and then what turns blue? And I would reply, well, what's the shot? Because we're not going to know what that is based on previous experience. I can guarantee that what will happen, it will be at a certain height, it will be a different tone, and we'll be shooting hair through that particular space. So working with Greig and working with Patrice, the production designer, we came up with this idea that rather than transitioning to a completely different color and something which would have to be lit independently, we decided to extend the sets to however high that we could go, but have those extensions be very simple versions, a colored cheap backing, so that basically there wasn't any issues with the producer. But we would go up to the roofs, up to the rafters, and build this out in a very basic form. And that then allowed Greig to not have to worry about trying to light the blue screen. Like, he would just light the room as if it was all there. And because like we carefully picked the tone of the color as to what that extension would be. Like, imagine that you had the entire set and that section was going to be this cheap extension. Basically, imagine taking that and blurring it, completely defocusing it so that you end up with a particular color. And then that's the color it's going to be, because that will give me the tone and the proper lighting on whatever I need to do to match into Greig's photography. It's a very simple process, but super effective. And it's something which I've carried ever since June 1 into June 2 and other projects. It
sounds like we did something similar on Blade Runner. It was Harrison Ford's kind of like apartment in Las Vegas. And they originally, I think John, the effects supervisor, originally wanted to put a blue screen outside of this set, and it was all big glass windows. It was a big penthouse looking out on this, fake city of Las Vegas. I said, well, actually what we're looking at through those glass windows will be light in the set as much as anything above or out of shot. What we decided to do is they painted a backing. They painted a gray backing to look like the extension of Las Vegas, the landscape of Las Vegas. And I lit the whole thing like I imagined it would be, in sort of red and orange. So the reason to have the gray is because the light was making the color. And now in post, those buildings and that were finessed in post, but actually the whole basis was there. The actors could look at the landscape, the light reflected off the landscape, but everything was integral.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's what you're kind of talking about, really, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Like basically, like, you don't have to go to this idea of an unnatural color, but it's super important that like the intent from the beginning stays through post, because like if like you try to set up something like that and then like there are decisions made in post where things completely change, well, you get what you get and you don't get upset, basically, because like you can't undo that. So like it's super important that like the directors, filmmakers have that clarity of vision to know that in post that isn't suddenly going to change into Disneyland or something completely different as to what you shot. And like in those situations where like basically you don't know what's going to go back there, like I would advocate that like you do have to do something where like you can push it and pull it. But for me, working with the directors and DOPs that I work with, like you don't tend to have these like complete changes in post. You know what I mean? So like it does allow you to like come up with like ways to shoot things which will be beneficial to visual effects, basically, to make a successful image.
One of the things that that really struck me, as Paul just pointed out, like during those early meetings, was that normally I'm the person fighting for the light. Like it's normally that's my job, and normally the VFX supervisors is fighting for enough blue screen budget from the producer. Like everyone's got their own little farmyard of problems. But what I think was really telling on Dune Part 1 and 2, obviously, I had somebody in my corner. I've never actually wanted to kiss a coworker as much as I wanted to kiss Paul. The first time.
Oh my goodness!
the first time that he came out with yeah, but the light's wrong on stage. I think we were talking about the Ornithopter or something. We were talking about something that like we were shooting an exterior or something. And everyone was going, well, we've got to shoot it on stage because we've got stage D available to us. And I think Paul went, no, the light will be wrong. And I'm like, go, Paul, thank you. So the thing is that I think what I've learned, and I guess I've always known this, but never really been able to sort of have a partner VFX wise to be able to kind of, align with those things, is that you can fake a lot of things in post. You can fake, you can cut people out of places and put them in different places. Like we've all been there. We've all seen how much trickery we can do. One thing you can never, ever fix is shoddy lighting, and you can help it with grade and you can help it with, whatever the hell we can do in the post, but you can't ever really fix it and put things in the right space. And I think what Paul nailed and it, nailed on the head, which I'm hoping that this can sort of, work its way through the industry, is that light rules. It really does. I mean, if you're trying to do something that integrates, light rules. And
100%.
The idea, I guess, we know where we've come from too, in that we had to shoot a blue screen at 18% gray because that was the best way to do the key. It feels like that was the tail wagging the dog. We had to light the screen so that you get a good key, but it never matched the light on the subject.
Yeah,
but the key was good. The key was good. But you know what I mean? Like
exactly.
So whereas now, for me, like again, and the great thing about having done that is that I can take that to my next jobs and say to the producers, well, this is what we did in that, and it worked really well, right? Obviously. But the biggest takeaway also, the other thing that Paul mentioned was these proxy sets. And, we were faced with that classic thing of we were building a set 12 feet off the ground, but actually on screen it needed to look like it was 50 feet off the ground, but they couldn't afford to build the 12 to 50, or not afford, it just wasn't a smart spend. But the reality also was that Patrice's designs, the lighting in them relied heavily on the set being there. There were slits of light, there were gobos, or the way the light fell was based on corners. It was, brutalist kind of architecture.
Mm-hmm.
The classic thing is to put, a softbox in a space and put sort of duvetine around it and try and cut it. And all the tests we did just weren't good. They just weren't, they weren't the right thing. Whereas when we did the proxy sets to the ceiling made out of simple scaffolding and canvas, I put my lights where they should have been and the set looked right. It was a revelation, I think, to the people that kind of hadn't done that before. I'm talking about from production standpoint. To say, oh, wow, yeah, okay. The extra money we spent on this, and I know it comes out of art department or whatever, it doesn't come out of, and this is the other thing too, isn't it? Like, let's get into that. Like, whose budget does it come out of?
Right.
Who pays for it? Anyway, that's a whole other episode. So,
can you be specific when you said earlier on, that Paul said to you, well, the light's not going to work. What can you talk about a specific scene or set that where that was the case, where you agreed that the light couldn't work in that situation?
So we were talking about, say, the Ornithopter scene with them flying over the sand dunes, which was direct sun coming in. It was bounce off the sand below. We had reflections of sky in all the windows. There's a lot of windows in that Ornithopter. If we were dealing with something that was a bit smaller, like it had smaller windows, I think it would have been more viable to do that on stage and to have more control. But that was one of the things that we debated, and production, quite smartly said, hey, we've got this one stage free, let's put it on that, because there's no weather cover, there's no weather issues, there's no, all the things that make sense on, in the handbook of how to, make a movie. But actually, it wouldn't have given us the flexibility and the full three dimensionality of light that, say, being outside was. So in that case, and Paul can attest to this as well, we went, well, can we go on a roof? Because we didn't want to go on the back lot because we would have been surrounded by screens. So we found the highest point in Budapest, which was like an old missile storage facility or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we built what we called a dog collar, which was a kind of a circle of sand bounce, so that when you were standing inside the Ornithopter, if you blurred your eyes, you had a horizon line and you had the sky, and below the horizon was sand and above it was sky. I think the horizon was possibly a little higher than it should have been, just given the way it was, but it was again, and I don't follow it through to post, so I don't know how easy or hard it was, the VFX to have done there. But I mean, I love the VFX in that sequence.
Having that particular setup, yes, there was a certain cost to actually get that dog collar and like the gimbal outside. But Greig was right. It was basically a fishbowl. It was just glass every single direction apart from behind you. But by getting the reflections of the characters on the windows up against the same color, made it super straightforward for me to then put the helicopter plates in place of the sand color, because like basically it was a sand color. So it was it was a different kind of composite in that, like, you weren't trying to extract the foreground to place onto a different background. No, you were. It was more of a blend. I'm a huge believer in like trying to have a little bit more of a complex comp, because like you're able to get all the bits and pieces which you want to then be able to put together. Always comes out better than like trying to break it down clinically into its different layers.
That's funny. It reminded me of something I did years ago, which was I had to do a helicopter flying and film the actors inside a helicopter, and they're meant to be flying over a desert. So the production had said, well, we put the helicopter on a gimbal in a stage, and, you light it. Well, how are you going to light a helicopter flying over a desert when you're actually on a stage? Exactly. Well, you have to do blue screen. But then the blue screen and all the reflections in the glass and the people's goggles and all, the nightmare. So I talked to the mechanical effects guy, and I said, I did this thing on Air America. We had a helicopter on the back of a truck and drove it into a jungle to mimic a crash, right? So we put this helicopter on this other film on the back of a truck, on a gimbal on the back of a truck, and they found this road that was going by these hillsides that looked like desert, And we shot half of the sequence, well, there was a number of sequences, in this thing driving down the road, looking at the desert outside. And it's like, there's such easy solutions. And I think you're saying the same thing. Why have a blue screen? Why use a LED wall when you can do something in reality and you have less to finesse? Yeah.
And I think the success of that would have been that, again, I'm confident. I mean, again, I'm a bias because I do things I like for a living, but I think humans can sniff incorrect lighting. Like, I keep using my mother as an example, who knows nothing about the film business, and if she doesn't feel it, she thinks there's something not quite right, then everybody understands that there's something not quite right. So there have been productions, and we're not going to name them here, obviously, but there have been productions that have notoriously had terrible VFX and are notorious for having VFX that don't kind of blend, and sitting opposite Paul, who was kind of banging my drum on my behalf, and then it just meant that we were establishing a kind of a workflow whereby if it didn't work for Paul, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for Paul. Because, ultimately Paul is the extension of my job. When I rap, we're used to the old school mentality of, probably beginning back in the 30s where, the DP waves goodbye on the martini shot of the last setup, and then comes back and does some color timing and then see at the premiere, as opposed to going, well, we're building a lot of the film in post. Shots that we have begun in, let's say, Budapest 8 months prior need to be fixed and resolved by Paul and his team. So to have two separate departments working on that thing, like, they need to be completely mind-melded.
Yeah. Well, I think too in the beginning when visual effects, we can do anything, a lot of times, we certainly had this experience, you would get on a movie and the visual effects people would see it as, now we get it and we do what we want. And we saw something one time and we said, well, why is the light coming this way? There was no light there. Oh, but we thought it looked better. So,
100%, 100%.
That argument, that's an interesting one, because the whole purpose of the director of photography, it's in the title. It's not rocket science to understand what that role entails. Mm-hmm. You would think that by the time you see the movie, if I go and see a film that you guys have shot, I know what I'm expecting. I know the taste level that's gone into it, and I trust it. The choices that have gone into it are of a quality that I will appreciate and enjoy. But then, as you said, James, like, if you've got another team working on post that doesn't align with your aesthetics, well, what happens when I go and see that film? I'm like, hang on, what's that scene? Like,
or what, I mean? Even if you don't know a lot about it, like your mother would say, there's something wrong, because it doesn't help the visual effects when it looks different than the rest of the scene.
That seems to get that relationship, your guys' relationship is getting more and more important. I remember, when I was shooting film and when, digital when it became possible to replace a light source, replace a lamp, a film lamp, with, I'm thinking of Jarhead, of replacing my light source with a flame. And it was something that seemed like quite a kind of challenge to everybody, production included, that I wanted to shoot this scene that was actually at night outside under these oil fires. I wanted to shoot it on stage because I wanted to control the atmosphere, and I knew I could put in a light source that would light the action, the characters, and that could be extended. Well, that relied very much on my relationship with the effects team on that film, that what we would replace, the fire that we would put to replace the lamp, would all work in conjunction with the way it was lit and the atmosphere that is actually in camera. But now that sort of relationship's got much, much more complicated. I mean, how much do you, Greig, sort of look at your lighting and think, well, actually I can light that in post? Like I can put a shadow in. Like in the old days, they used to paint a shadow on the floor, like on David Lean's films. They would paint a shadow on the floor, but the light wouldn't actually do it. The painter would do it. Now you could do that in post, can't you? You can put in a shaft of light and a bit of atmosphere coming through a window in post. But do you use that? Because, I mean, I was using the technique to replace a film light with a flame.
But the light was still there.
Yeah.
But I think the success of that, and with, like, say, 1917 and that beautiful fire rig in that film, was that the VFX people did not have to change any of the qualities of what you had done.
Right.
What they could change was, like you said, it was they cover the
Physical,
actual mechanics. But I think where I don't believe, and I'm positive Paul agrees, is that you can't fundamentally change the quality of the light once it's been shot. I mean,
you can't.
You can do little things like in the DI, you can darken the fill side, and you can lighten the lit side, and you can change the contrast ratio, but ultimately, I've been, unfortunately, I've done this before where I've overfilled an actor's face thinking, I need to get detail into their eyes, but I can grade it later. And every time I watch those movies, those scenes, and I'm not going to tell you guys what they are because it'll just contribute to my anxiety.
We'll never be able to see anything else.
And my madness. Yeah. But there are some scenes I remember, like, where the director said to me, like, we've got to see into the eyes, and I've gone... I've over and above, and I've gone, well, I'll fix it later. And I can't. And I've never, and I can't look at those scenes.
When I join a movie, I'm on it for 2 years. I'm on from the very beginning of prep, and I go all the way through till the last visual effects shot is in the DI. The only bit I miss is the actual mix. And it's super interesting and to go back to Greg's point about, sometimes seeing a movie which you weren't expecting certain things, and there's a big component in this, as in that some movies are found in the edit. You may have shot all of this footage, but then the edit, suddenly things chop and change, and what happens is that your work sometimes gets reframed by the editors. Sometimes things are split from one side to the other side, put together. Performances are morphed and joined, and if you look carefully, editors don't tend to spend a lot of time on set because they have to make hard decisions, right? So you may have spent hundreds of hours on a particular scene, so coming up, building it for it to go into the bin, and it won't be used. So you don't tend to find editors hanging around on set too much because they do have to make those decisions. But look, once the shoot's done and it's in post, there are times when both of your work will get slightly reframed. Suddenly there is a zoom into a shot for dramatic effect, and you never had a zoom in your package, I guarantee it. But suddenly,
you guys like zooms, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh.
So
zooms.
And that's where that occurs. And some of the hardest visual effects work is during that particular period of trying to cobble together something which has been taken from different pieces and putting it all together and trying to make it cohesive, because it totally disregards what what you've done on set to like try to get the best basis for a successful visual effects shot. And those ones are usually the ones which take the longest, trying to get that to work. And yes, you can't change lighting in post. You just can't. We don't have the tools. We will one day, but then like you just don't have those tools right now. And I'll take that to the next level. I will change a background in a sequence and break the continuity slightly to make sure that when you're watching this sequence, that something isn't jarring because I'm trying to squeeze a foreground into a background, but like the background's beautiful, right? It's no, I will adapt the exposure, the tone of the background, which like you don't register during a sequence. But if you were to forensically go through and just say, oh, that doesn't match that doesn't match that. But when it runs, it plays. And your eye doesn't pick out a bad comp because like basically I've protected what was shot and I'm adjusting the background to match the lighting of what was shot rather than try to change the actual lighting. So it's those principles which like try to make, the last thing you want is to be sat in an epic movie and then like shots come up and it just jars a little bit, but you don't know why. And that's what the audience now senses. They call it bad CGI. It's having broken the balance between what the foreground and what the background is. And if you shoot in a particular way, knowing what the intent is, and you follow that intent, well, then you're going to have a successful shot which doesn't jar. You start playing with that, there isn't anything you can do. And again, you get what you get.
So what are some of the things that you make sure that you discuss during prep? Definitely, I guess, go through how the shots are, what the camera
how the
angles
scenes are being shot.
Yeah.
And what, I mean, particularly working with somebody like Denis, who's so prepped. I mean, I don't know how much he storyboarded on DUNE, but I'm sure he would have shot listed it.
He would have had it in his head.
In his head, how he was going to shoot the scene. So how does that process work in pre-production? How do you decide, how you're going to approach certain sets?
Because it's not always the first idea that you go with. Sometimes it takes a couple of weeks to discuss.
I mean, I feel like, again, Paul, unless you remember differently, I feel like we were pretty stringent about how we achieved those goals. Like we didn't have, like we had only a couple of different scenarios. Like, I mean, I'm probably overly simplifying it because of, the old memories of a shoot 5 years ago. You start to go,
right.
Oh, it's really easy.
It's so easy.
5 years? Oh, my goodness. 5 years.
So much fun.
I think it was more than that, actually. It was when I was 6 years. But like I recall we had some interior Ornithopter flying. We had, which by the way, on part 1 and part 2, we did differently. Part 2, we did some different interior Ornithopter work, which I can get into later if you want.
Yeah, sure.
But we also had a backlot that was a massive concrete pad, which we needed to extend. It was, again, everything in that universe is sort of beyond big. It's like, it's not football field size. It's kind of, Manhattan Central Park size. We talked about how to extend that, and again, the cliche would have been to put a blue screen up around the edges of that for a set extension, but Paul quite smartly pushed for a sand screen, which he should talk about in a sec, because it was a genius move. Because what it did, again, I'll say it as a cinematographer, like you put your lens on something that's blue and it shouldn't be blue. I think it messes with your brain. I mean, I know we can do it, and we can sit here and say, well, just frame it as you would normally. What is normal? Like we always respond to our surroundings. Like we respond to what we see through a lens, and that's how we go up or down 2 inches, or like where's the horizon in relation to a head, and like and we know the difference between a horizon through a head or through a chest makes a big difference in terms of the emotional output that the shot has at that point in the movie. So if you don't have a horizon and all you've got is a blue, like how do you make that decision? So it was a pretty simple process of going, well, what's in the background? Let's try and do it the same color, same tone as Paul just said. But the backlot was kind of a big thing that I remember being as kind of one of the main things that I found it really easy to shoot because it was the right color. But Paul, talk about that, because that sand screen thing was a bit bit of a head scratcher for everybody, I recall, when you first proposed it, right?
Yeah, people didn't really understand about what this visual effects supervisor was trying to do. But I've put in imagery together. I come from comp. I was a compositor for a number of years, so like I have an innate understanding of like if I have an image and I need to change something in it, what can I get away with, basically? And having gone through multiple films when I was still on the box, it gives you a really good understanding of like how imagery goes together. This was very specific to DUNE. We're in the desert, we're in sand color, so like why not have all the extensions be that particular color? I wasn't too worried about trying to extract it because like basically again it wasn't this idea of fully extracting a foreground. It's more of a blend. If I have a sympathetic color to what I'm trying to put in there, well then it's going to be a lot easier to actually do. But also what that did provide is that like we had a lot of reflections. We had a lot of people wearing goggles and stuff and what have you. And what you got for free was these sand-colored reflections in the distance. And again, if you forensically go through some of the shots in DUNE 1 or DUNE 2, you can see the sand screens in some of the things, but you don't register it because it's just sand colored and it would have been desert anyway. So rather than trying to fix something over somebody's eyes, or like if it had been blue, they wouldn't have been wearing the goggles. Simple as that. So like trying to keep all those things together, to try to keep it in camera is the best approach. And look, now it's not the sand color, which was that was relevant to the desert. It's more of a sympathetic color, and it's not against that. I would never put a blue or a green. Well, if the background's going to be green, or if the background's going to be blue, well, guess what? It's going to be blue. But then like it's going to be lit by the DOP as if that is the background. Like it doesn't have to do anything specific to that, so that I can then pull an edge. It's not needed.
That's why I think the stuff that in Blade Runner, as you mentioned before, like it was so successful in that, because it wasn't a reach to try and make it a comp. It was kind of just, probably worked in camera. And so therefore it was probably cheaper in the long run because, there were some shots that you could get away with without replacing. The whole volume argument that I make where there are times in the volume that you've got to replace the background. So you're not getting everything for free, but there are shots on a volume that because the lighting is correct, and I will go on the record as saying the volume is a lighting volume, not a VFX volume, but that's another conversation. So because ultimately it's creating the accurate lighting of which you can then comp in or not comp in. Yeah, getting the accurate lighting I think is the number one name of the game to get good VFX.
You said that between the two dunes, the copter methodology changed?
So there was an Ornithopter in part one, and there was a big scene in the Ornithopter in part one where they're flying over the desert, and they go and save some workers. That was like a fishbowl. The second dune had an Orny that we called Orny B because it looked a little bit like a bee, and I love Patrice. God love Patrice because his first design for that he sent me, I was just like, oh God, it's amazing. It's an Orny B, we're calling it. But the difference was that was set at dawn with a sun coming up into that first sort of 10 minutes of sun above the horizon. We felt, well, obviously think about where you would do that. You would do it either over a course of 17 dawns at, outside in the backlot, which is not ever going to fly. But I felt we had enough RGBAW lighting on part two. We didn't necessarily on part one because it was still early days. It was before the vortex and before the mass of RGBAW lights. But we had enough of those lights that we could actually create the horizon of pixel map, the horizon of kind of a sunrisey, orangey look, and then going into a sort of a very, very blue, 15,000 Kelvin, 20,000 Kelvin sky and above that area. So I studied sunrises, and we just pixel mapped a screen with a horizon that was at the correct level. We raised and lowered the horizon to make sure that the horizon was right. And we just did it like that. And I felt, again, I mean, I'm not privy to the post process, so Paul can probably correct me here or not, but it felt like all the stuff that we're getting in camera felt like it was accurate. It was the right dawn type of look, and then when they come around and the sun reveals itself above the rocks, we just raised a sun source into shot, and it became a soft kind of sun. So I thought it was quite accurate. I mean, it's quite nice having those accuracies and the tools. Again, this is what I mean. Like the last 6 years, the whole tool set has changed for us as cinematographers. We can now accurately create that 20,000 Kelvin blue, southern sky blue or northern sky blue in the southern hemisphere. No, northern hemisphere. Yeah, you know what I mean. But north sky, south sky, whatever that is, in whichever hemisphere I'm in right now.
Australians.
I'm sorry. Can I tell you a story about that? Can I tell you a story? I was traveling as a commercial DP, and I was in the northern hemisphere doing something. I came into, I think it was the southern hemisphere, and I had to set a scene in a certain direction because, we set it a certain way, either facing south in the northern hemisphere or north. And I faced the whole thing in the wrong direction because I got into this scout and I was jet lagged, and I'd just come from the opposite end of the hemispheres, and I actually set the whole thing facing the incorrect way. So I just flagged that.
So basically, you did the whole thing front lit, Greig?
The whole thing's front lit. The whole thing's front lit.
That's funny.
Yeah. I was working with an actress who was from New York one time. We were shooting on the beach in Santa Monica. It was a dawn scene. And she asked me, why is the sun not coming up?
Well, you're used to your own geography.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, good company, Greig. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad my terrible brain was good.
So I'm intrigued in DUNE. I mean, 1 and 2. I mean, the integration of the work in the sand and the worms and the characters within it. What was the biggest challenge about that, and how did you maintain such a consistency to the look of that?
The movies I work on, I see every version. I see every pixel. It goes through a pretty stringent process, but it's about keeping it simple from the very beginning, because there are hundreds of people who work on this, and obviously I deal with the direct supervisors, and they then have their own supervisors who then have their own leads, who then have a bunch of artists, and it is basically herding cats. But what you try to do from the very beginning is try to keep things simple, because each stage, especially from lighting and compositing, each stage has got so many options to change things, adapt things. Basically, if a corner is cut in the lighting and it's adjusted for in the comp, that can get past you, and then it's only when certain changes have to happen that suddenly you realize, okay, this sequence has been set up in a way in which is going to be problematic, and sometimes you can't go back, right? So what is so important at the very beginning is to make sure that you get to see the original rendered outputs from what's been produced, because we spend so much time on set of trying to capture references of what the lighting should be, and all these balls, all these HDRIs are simply there to capture what you guys do on set, so that we can then replicate if we're having to put something into the scene. It's really quite important. If we don't get it, well then we're kind of making it up, right? So, and that's a whole different process. But the fact that we have gone to the pains of actually getting this set up, it's super important to see what the raw output of what that is in the scene. So if you don't see that, and basically it goes through a process where somebody's already put in some invisible bounces in the CG, and it's gone into comp, and they start to bring up different sides, and if you don't catch that early, it is going to catch you out later. I guarantee it. So I even have that put into contracts now as well, so that if I feel that a sequence is going down a particular path, I've got the right to see the actual individual passes which go towards to actually make that up. So it's super important to, I can't overstress it how important it is to keep it simple from the beginning, because, and look, I've been on this, happened on the DUNE 1 where we had one particular shot where we were just iterating and we couldn't get it right until basically you look under what's happening and think, okay, like that's why. Go back to the basics. Give me a simple render. You know what? That's what finaled. That is what finaled, because that was the most believable, because it was matching exactly what we did on set. There wasn't any creative change to like try to bring the stuff up, try to beautify the actual CG. No, like there's a thing which you always have to try to fight, not fight against, but it's like the beautification of CG in a shot. You know, like if it's going to have sand and a kick up of sand or smoke or stuff, and like sometimes it covers the asset, that's totally okay, because that's what would happen if you were to actually shoot this. If it was lit in a particular way, backlight, but then like, you know, it wasn't showing certain aspects of this Ornithopter, and then add in an additional light which like would be in the set, but then you would have to take it takes away from the believability. So like, I don't allow any of that in there.
Sometimes the imperfections make it seem much more real, because
100%.
in real life,
100%.
we have lots of it.
It's also kind of like the early days. I remember working with a production designer who would watch dailies and said, I can't see my set. You know, I can't see the roof.
Yeah.
Or I can't see that corner of the room. You know, and you go, well,
same idea.
Yeah, but
same
what
idea.
do you want?
Yeah.
So we're still talking about the same things.
But it's also interesting, because when you were talking, it made me think of DI timing sometimes, because you start going, you're making little changes, and you go down a road, and you're not picking up that you're going down
too quickly.
So the only thing you can do is just strip everything off and start
exactly.
again.
Exactly. Keep it simple.
How do you guys work when a shot is basically all CG? Maybe you've got one element in there that is something that is total an extension. I mean, a worm going through the dunes and stuff. I mean, that is not in camera, is it?
There is a couple of full CG.
The plate is.
Yeah, and that's where the collaboration is really useful, because yes, like there is helicopter stuff to we try and track across the sand dunes. There is tracking vehicle stuff that we shot in Abu Dhabi that hopefully becomes the plate for what goes into it. There is a shot in Dune Part 2 that I'm really pumped about, which is a shot of Zendaya popping up out of the sand, and it's during the battle in the dead act, and Zendaya pops out of the sand. She does a few little twisty kicks, sort of headbutts somebody. She does a great kind of stunt move. Twists around, jumps, falls over somebody. Runs 30 meters and then turns around and has a close up. It's a great shot. I love the shot because it's dynamic, it's stunty, it's kind of right for the film at that point in time. But it also features the actress. It features a close up of the actress, and I love the fact that pretty much fits that question, in that it's an all CG shot, except for, and Paul, you can agree or not with this, but except for her turning. I mean, we shot that in Abu Dhabi. We shot her turning, but the rest of it is motion capture of various stunt people who have various skills that can then add up to a move that I can then lens whilst my director is directing me. We might not be in the desert anymore. We might be in a capture volume in Marina del Rey, but it's still the same ingredients, where it's like the action's correct, the director's there, the director of photography is there. I'm running around, following this action, and if you watch the scene, I love it because it's messy. I miss, as an operator, I miss a number of beats. Look, it's a classic thing. It's like you're in the heat of battle. It's like a war zone. And like I see it, and I'm looking at something, and she runs off, and I'm like, oh shoot, I have to pan and catch up with her, but it feels messy and raw, and that is an all CG shot. But it's been the photography and the operating has been done by the same people that did the movie, and the director was on the set to direct that camera.
Do you know what the first question was on that footage? I was asked.
What?
Do you want me to?
Should we correct it?
Should we correct it? Should he us to correct some of the camera work? So, it's.
How would you feel about that, Greig? Yeah.
No, I feel as good. I feel like that's But this is where, and again, I don't want to keep tooting Paul's horn because that's like it's going to get boring. But that's what it takes somebody in that leadership role who is dealing with that footage later to actually not go, oh yeah, you know what? It really would have been better if he caught that fantastic spin kick that she did, because we spent all that time capturing it and recording it, and then suddenly that gets adjusted, and then the next part gets adjusted to make up for that, and suddenly you're looking at something that you know. I've always thought about the VFX world where you've got multiple people working, all very talented people, of course, right? So I'm not going to ever. It's not disrespecting the people that do that, but the problem is it'd be literally like us on set, like having 17 people from our department all having an opinion about how the lighting should be or the camera action, you know. And the reality is the buck stops with us at that point, and often we don't have the time to be too introspective about what we're doing. We have to light it, we have to shoot it, we've got a schedule to keep, we've got minutes, not hours to do shots. And sometimes that lack of like ability to see the bigger picture means that we work on a really instinctual level that means that there are going to be those humanistic mistakes, quote unquote, you know, or elements. Whereas, you know, if we have time to break those away because we have time in post and we have people to fix them, we all agree that's not necessarily a better thing. So
yeah,
I think
it's the goal for me in visual effects is to make it as realistic as possible. And if that means keeping what was done by amazing people on set, that's the focus. And, you know, it's not like, you know, like visual effects artists are just trying to do the very best they can to produce the very, you know, we work so many hours to like try to produce the best visual that like we possibly can. But then, like, you know, you just need to direct it in a certain way as to what the intent is. You know, it's again keeping it simple.
How do you think? I don't know what you think about this, but to me, things the way films are made are changing, especially the big movies, the big action movies. And it feels like, I mean, we were quite involved in animation for a number of years, and it feels like those disciplines are now merging. So how do you feel that role, Greig, as a cinematographer? I mean, when more and more of a film is going to be created in a computer, and how is AI going to impact that as well? I mean, when you talk about the one shot where, you know, it's motion capture and created like that, but that's only the tip of the iceberg of what can be done, isn't it? I mean, it's nice in an ideal world to be able to be there with the camera on a real set. I mean, you know me, I would love everything to be there in camera. I'm not a big effects fan, sorry, present company accepted, but you know, I love being on a location and shooting in a real world. But I mean, we're getting very, very far away from that now, don't you think?
I do, and it's funny you talk about the work that you guys have done in animation, because again, I'm not to blow hot wind, of course, but Hollywood doesn't deal well with change. It doesn't deal well with somebody saying, "Oh, we need a sand screen, not a blue screen," or "I need to shoot this outside." It doesn't deal well with that. Also, doesn't deal well with the fact that as a cinematographer, the idea of what a cinematographer is they turn up to set with their light meter. They boss around a few lighting people and put a camera in a place and go home and come back and grade like in 6 months. That's what the cliche of a cinematographer or director of photography is. That doesn't account for changing mediums. It accounts for back in the 60s when you had to put up multiple kind of arc lights and you had to have a certain kind of high contrast film that needs a lot of light. But it doesn't account for the fact of what we actually do, which is we are the eyes of the film. And, you know, when you're dealing with a medium like animation, and again, this is what I was saying, like the fact that you guys did animation, to me, that's a door opening. That means that cinematographers going forward or directors can say, you know what, I need a cinematographer on this animation. So no one can say, well, no, you don't. They're like, well, no, look at Wally. Like, look at the work. Look at that work. That's really fantastic. So it means that as cinematographers, our role is changing. where we don't necessarily need to know how to expose film. You know, we don't necessarily need to know how to technically do a crane shot, you know, and what crane it is. And like, we don't actually have to know any of that stuff anymore. We could, as cinematographers, be purely based in animation or in a Blender. I mean, the animated film that won the Oscar this year was made in Blender, which is a free software program.
Open source
Right.
software,
Like
yeah.
that's not the last of it either. Like Blender, Unreal,
No, it's not.
It's
it's
not the
not.
last. It's going to be absolutely prevalent, and it's going to be, and the world is going to be calling for directors of photography, because and they could come from different backgrounds. By the way, they could come from animation. They could come from tech. I'm not being a purist and saying, well, the only cinematographers that can exist are they learned at film school or, you know, went to art college or like, but there needs to be always a clarity of vision on a film. And that needs to be a director of photography or somebody. And if it isn't that, then it will be somebody else. And there'll either be lack of clarity of vision or the role will change the name. The name will change. That's where I'm pretty kind of passionate about the fact that we as cinematographers need to learn the new tech. And, you know, like someone like Paul, you know, for the last few films, we've been working quite closely with Unreal Engine, which, you know, has been the word game changer is overly cliched, I think, at this point in time, but like it changes the process, changes the way that we do our job.
Can you explain?
Tell us more about that.
Unreal Engine.
Well, that's a whole series of a podcast. It's not even just an episode. It's like, but effectively, Unreal Engine is a 3D gaming engine. And you know, it can do it. It was designed initially to do those shooting games. You know, like silly shooting games that my kids play that I can't stand, which is running around and stuff. But the fact of the matter is, they design worlds in 3D, which means you've got the autonomy to go into a room, and the engine can create that room like the microsecond before you enter it, so that the computer doesn't have to have, you know, too much data stored to create worlds. It builds it as it goes. And so we've been able to sort of usurp that technology to work in the film world, where we can be using it for multitudes of reasons. Like I used it on Mandalorian for the first season to pre-light these scenes. You know, Paul and I have just done a film where we used it where we had a virtual art department, right, Paul, where the virtual art department would work under the production designer. The production designer would put their designs in to this group. We would go in, we could lens sequences in Unreal, knowing the set hasn't even been built yet, but so therefore we can give feedback to, you know, to what we were going to need. It's a much more improved version of, you know, the white cardboard, you know, build with the pencil can. So yeah, that's a whole other conversation, which is super exciting and interesting.
But are you using that as a sort of previs tool, or is actually in production?
In production.
Well, it's in production. It's used for previs in that world, but not just previs. But it also gets replaced. Like I'm working with Paul and his group now to lens shots for the final film, which is unusual because normally, you know, we're off at other films,
right?
You know, and I am as well. Like it's we're off doing other things, and we can't be lensing things. But in this case, the sequences are designed by the directors. They're approved. The action is approved, and then I come in and I lens a shot based on the approved action, assets that are accurate, that I've lit. Like I've moved the sun to be in a certain direction. So it means, again, it goes back to that authorship of the role, you know?
Just to clarify though, you're sort of moving the sun. So you're moving the sun in Unreal Engine. I mean, you're doing that in the animation, in the computer.
In real time.
So you're basically doing what we did in animation.
it's very much like a real time.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think in animation, because our directors we just work with were animators, and that they've found it to be a game changer, because in animation, I think it involves iterations where there's like Maya and there's rendering, and like it's all very slow.
It might take a couple of weeks before you see a shot rendered out. But the thing was really interesting in animation to one of the latter films we worked on is that the lighting department and the animators went out and they sort of scanned the light. They recorded the light in a forest, and they took this back and put it on this scene that was set in a forest, and it looked awful. and the point is, I always think that is really revealing, because cinematography is not necessarily about completely taking the real world and sticking it on your scene, is it? It's about a concept of how the light and the camera, the frame and the lens actually help tell the story in the way the director wants to tell the story. So that's why it's so important that somebody like you, Greig, is involved in doing what is basically animation within a live action movie. Well, it's called a live action movie.
But this is where it requires, and I'll go on the record to say this, it requires coordination between the departments that are in charge of that. Because so Paul's department, let's break it down to real simple terms. Like, the cinematography departments, the people with the cameras and the lights, right? The post department are the people with the computers, the powerful computers and the smart people in the back rooms. But right now, up to now, they haven't really mixed. Whereas now they're mixing, and they're mixing in a way that people are going, oh my God, this is revealing. And I mean, Paul, you tell us, but like from your perspective, I'm sure getting shots that have been lensed by the cinematographer versus somebody else in the post, somebody in Vancouver who's doing the post on a particular shot, and there's hundreds of shots, which means there's hundreds of vendors, and hundreds of people doing lensing. It's like stays singular, right, Paul?
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, Greig, the way we see it is that you lens in a shot, the directors are going to approve, and it looks good. Whereas if you do it a different way, it's going to take you iterations to actually get there. But then having you involved with that particular process, on an interim basis is so important. Seeing versions of the movie with your space shots is it's a different look. And it works really well. So I'm a big believer of trying to get as much from yourself and other people on set to try to travel through post, because it doesn't make sense just to finish there and then basically you come back for a couple of weeks at the end and try to figure out what's what. Going back to Blade Runner, Roger and James, and you guys coming back for 8 weeks or something like that. That was a real eye opener for me, seeing the work progress rapidly. After getting to a point like that, I think, it was a game changer.
One thing I'm pretty passionate about is the fact that we are in an evolving industry. And you touched upon AI, which is again a whole other discussion point, which we could probably have a couple of whiskeys and sit around a table and talk about. But the fact that and cry, but also just kind of celebrate what it could potentially do. But again, it's all about the people that control it. We know that the technology is zero by itself, and we also know that when there's a void or a black hole or a vacuum of people who understand what is going on, that vacuum will always get filled by someone or some group. And I'm passionate, even though I can barely turn my computer on, let alone run an Unreal program. I know what it can do. And I also know that there are cinematographers out there who are extraordinarily talented that need to know what this is, because, but also on the flip side, Paul has set a gold standard of what a VFX supervisor does and is and understands. And so he is, through his multiple successes with those little gold statues, Paul, I won't embarrass you, sorry, mate. Like has basically just said, well, this is what a top VFX supervisor thinks. This is how they do it. They embrace the technology. They embrace the cinematographer even when they're not there. They embrace their ideas. They embrace the vision and the authorship that the cinematographer has to make a film look a certain way. And whatever technology that requires is what gets used.
I say cry because I love the current process. I love being a part of the prep. I love the shoot. I love the post. And there isn't a single film where it doesn't amaze me that the movie actually gets to the cinema. You know what I mean? It's like such a different process. But you know what is coming, and basically what's here is a fundamental shift to what we do. You know, like I follow what's going on religiously. I can see what's happening. And Greig makes a very valid point, is that you come up with skills for like filmmaking that like these generative AI programs they are getting better and better and better. But like the overall construction of a movie and like a story, it just isn't there. It's I see things coming from like different universities throughout the world who are open sourcing their code. Just like the other day, I took a picture of myself, put it into this website, and it took me and it orbited the camera around to the side of my head, and that was just from a single image. Now it didn't look like me at the end of it, but there have been updates since. I know there have been updates since where like you'll be able to then put reference images in and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's happening? And what that is, that's coverage. That's like you just shot something, and like you're starting to see things where you can change the lighting and stuff. It's not really controllable just yet, but it's going to get there, and it will change things. Having the skill of bringing a movie together is what's going to keep us employed once this generative AI takes over, because it will.
And I think the fact that we've like, this is the my advice that I'm giving to any young DP is to understand the technology. Like it's imperative, because the days of us turning up to set with a light meter, like it's still gonna happen, right? And there are going to be cinematographers like Hoyter, for example, who will not shoot anything but film, and Linus, like they're shooting film and they're turning up with their light meter. That's great, but that's the 0.0001% of the population. But there are other productions, like the animation that won for the Oscar this year, that I didn't get to talk to them at the Oscars this year, but I would have loved to have found out how they lensed that film. Like, who was in charge? What was their title? Like, I want to make sure that as cinematographers, because there is a vision that occurs throughout a film, and that it's a cinematographer doing it. Maybe we're not called cinematographers in 50 years, though. Like, maybe we're called something else, but it's still got the same requirement for what we do on set.
There is this sort of technology that you could actually, you can now. You can actually record a scene, right?
Yep.
And in a virtual world, and then place the cameras later and light it later.
Yep.
I mean, that is actually possible. I mean, it's very, primitive at the moment, but I can see in the future that a director will, have the actors in a space, maybe, and just record the thing like as a play, but as 3-dimensional, as a 3-dimensional hologram, whatever, and then figure out how they want to shoot it afterwards and how they want to light it afterwards.
It's 100% going to happen. Like, I have no doubt. I know it's mid to mid 2025, but I am positive that we can look back at this particular time and go, all right, when we're so naive and innocent to believe it was a long way off. I don't think it's a long way off. I think there's a point. I've seen, again, it all depends. If you're going to do a drama, a low budget drama about someone in the South and whatever, like, you're going to shoot it. You're going to shoot it right now.
Right.
But if you're doing something that's a little more sort of high kind of concept, that maybe the characters are a little bit alienoid or not humanoid, like there's something about them, that there's something makeup wise that we can get away with the fact that humans aren't quite right in CG at the moment. right? Because again, humans are tough. They'll always be tough, but maybe there's a way to do that. And like I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it where you like that scene I just told you about where I shot with Zendaya. Like I could put the camera anywhere. I could have flown above like a helicopter shot, and the scene was blocked. It was rehearsed. It was done. And it was put together. You know, I don't think on that day I lit that scene. I don't think I had a chance to light it. But the point is that one day I can then make that sunset scene. You know, or I can make it. I can put a valley, like a row of mountains, and have the light skipping across the top of the mountains and skimming just the section where she lands at the end, and put a ridge in the valley, put a ridge in the mountains where she lands. Like. There are ways to get that precise with the scenes.
As you say, on one side of it's exciting, on the other side it's terrifying. But it's different. One thing is sure, it's going to be different.
It's different, but I think provided we in this next, you know, we've been doing the same way for 100 years, you know, give or take the digital or the film or the whatever. But the next 100 years for our jobs is going to be really exciting, and I think it requires holding hands with VFX because they are integral to our world. I think that we need to just keep promoting that relationship.
Right. Well, that's why we wanted this discussion, really, because that's what we feel. You know, the disciplines have to be really integrated.
Working together, yeah.
Oh, it's great.
Well, good.
Yeah.
This was great. Yeah. Thank you for doing this. It was very interesting.
And very nice talking to you both.
Yeah.
Likewise. We could talk about Unreal for years and AI for years. That's a whole other conversation. Which I'll send you guys some light studies that we did in Jordan if you want. Like so for June Part 2, like there was a sequence that we did at the beginning, at scene 10, I keep referring it to, right? It's the scene, the eclipse scene where he wakes up, they come over the ridge, they run off into a corner, they go up top. Like it's a whole series of kind of like little places that needed to match. Like they ran into the shadow, you know, and then the Harkonnen came in, he was in like you couldn't see them because they were in shadow. Like there was a very complicated scene when it comes to shadow and light. And none of the locations were ever together. Like they were all at different little locations around Jordan, and nothing was close, which meant that if we missed part of that scene yesterday, we're not going back there again tomorrow to pick that up and then travel to the next location. Like it was like everything needed to be kind of, we had a drone go and take thousands of photos of these rocks, and my assistant was able to put them into the location, into Google Earth, and then create really accurate light studies when it comes to where the shadows fall. Like normally we'd stand there with a meter or a compass and go, okay, well, it's this time and it's going to be about here at about 9 o'clock, right? We're able to say we need to be turning over at 8:17, right? So therefore rehearsing from 7:50 and be that diligent with it. And we were also prepping in Budapest for something that we were going to shoot in 6 months. So we needed to know, we couldn't go back to the location with a new idea and go, okay, what's this light going to do? We could put condors in, machines in to create extra shadow, and we could figure out that would buy us 2 extra hours of shadow, which would mean an extra less day shooting because we could stay for 2 more hours. And it was a real eye opener. I'll send those to you because they're I've got those on Google Drive. They're just interesting to look at because they're just like light studies. Like they're just sun paths, like you would do. Like normally people would go out and take photos of the sun throughout the day, but this was digital. So
wow, interesting, great
Technology.
Yeah. Well, thank you again.
Yes, thank you, guys.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.